Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. Well, today we're going to do some of the news and notes, some more coaching bull mess, some more Chicago Bears bull crap. I thought we were cool, Chicago. I thought we were cool, you know. Like I was going to let you guys have your off season. Yeah, you got Ben Johnson. Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Yep. Get the Lions. Ha! We got them, right, boys? We got them. And then they went and stuck it to us. So getting a little too cocky over there, in my opinion. I'm not a fan. I guess we'll start there. The Chicago Bears have decided in their infinite wisdom to hire Al Harris. He's going to be Chicago's pass game coordinator. Defensive, obviously. So, yeah, don't like that. It's not even necessarily, I don't know how good he's going to be. Probably pretty good. I don't know, but yeah, I don't like it very much. If we could just stop stealing each other's people, you know what I mean? Now we got it. I just feel like we got to get Khalil Mack. I know he's not just a Chicago guy. He was only there for 4 years or something. I mean, we got to punch back at some point. I mean, this is getting out of control. I mean, we're going up against Darius, for two different teams now. We're going up against Aaron Jones, for crying out loud. I mean, Rodgers is probably going to the Vikings. I mean, I just, if you guys are going to keep screwing with us, we should have got Danielle Hunter. I don't know why we didn't get Danielle Hunter. That was stupid. Maybe we can still get him. I don't know. Talk to Houston. Say, hey, come on. He ain't that good. It sucks. We got to do something, man. This is no good. This is no good. The Packers, however, will be getting Luke Getsy back. Bears fans are laughing. Technically, that fits. They're laughing because they're kind of stupid. Yes, Luke Getsy was a failure for you, just like everybody was a failure for you. But they got hired because they were actually good elsewhere in their given roles, just like Matt Nagy was very good with the Chiefs, and then he went to Chicago and was a laughingstock and went right back to the Chiefs, and now they're going to continue winning Super Bowls every year. Bottom line is, despite his reputation as something a little bit bigger, which I don't think he necessarily should be anything bigger, but when Luke Getsy was here, things were actually quite good, and if the Packers want him back, then they should bring him back. There's also been some interesting talk. I don't even know how much space there is left. What other positions we have to offer at this point, unless we're going to be firing somebody. But a big shock to everybody was that Bobby Slowick is out as the Texans' offensive coordinator, which, to some degree makes sense. Houston, something was just a little bit off with their offense. Granted, ours was similarly, and we didn't fire anybody on our side, but I suppose each team has to identify the reason, and they identified Slowick. But Slowick was even getting, head coaching looks. I think it was Jacksonville. I can't remember who it was exactly, but he was getting interviews as a head coach. All of those fell through, and then Houston said, well, we tried, bud. I mean, it's going to hurt his opportunities to get a head coaching. How funny would that be if you got a head coaching gig and was on the way out anyways? But he didn't get any head coaching gigs. Houston said, you got any more interviews there, Chief? No. All right, well, then you're out. But Slowick does have ties to Green Bay, including being a Green Bay native. His dad is a former Packers assistant, and he also did coach with Matt LaFleur while they were in Washington. So there's quite a bit of overlap there with Green Bay. Again, I don't think there's any place for him unless we bring him in as a consultant again. I don't know, but not again, but another consultant. Bears got J.T. Barrett as their quarterbacks coach. Antoine Randall L. is their new assistant head coach. They're getting a bunch of former players. That must be the plan of the new head coach, Ben Johnson, to bring in a bunch of former players to kind of galvanize the culture in that place. Would have to be. This can't just be a coincidence. You got Al Harris, J.T. Barrett, Antoine Randall L., and Al Harris as your coaching staff. But then we got Michael Silver of The Athletic reports the 49ers are expected to name Robert Saleh as their new defensive coordinator. I kind of mentioned that, I think, on Packernet After Dark, that I had heard that. I wasn't sure how solid it was, but sounds like, again, according to Michael Silver, for whatever that's worth, that's pretty well locked up. Jaguars did hire offensive coordinator Liam Cohen as their head coach. Raiders hired Pete Carroll as their head coach. And then last little bit of NFL news that I thought was interesting. The Athletics' Jeff Howe said one name he has, quote, heard to watch for the Raiders at quarterback is Russell Wilson. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, I don't even know how much you'd have to really hear anything or how long you'd have to keep your ear to the ground before you would hear Russell Wilson back with Pete Carroll as a rumor. I mean, duh. It says, according to Howe, Wilson and Carroll have mended fences since the Seahawks traded Wilson to Denver ahead of the 2022 season, which could lead to an open door. I think the issue I have with that is that Seattle traded him away right before his massive implosion. He was slowly declining in Seattle, and they said, yeah, let's go ahead and get whatever we can for this guy while we can. Shipped him away, and he's been terrible. The point is, they saw the writing on the wall that he was done and got rid of him. Why would you then, 4 years later, come back and say, that's the guy I want leading my team? He was much more established anyways in Seattle. He had all the I don't know. I feel like that's just being kind of a... I wouldn't be surprised if that's not very concrete information and people just kind of lazily connecting the dots. Could be wrong. Maybe there's something to that. But again, Seattle was very wise to identify it was time for him to go. Again, it could have just been the GM, and maybe Pete Carroll always loved him and thinks he's still got a bunch left. But, geez, could you imagine if you're the Raiders and you hire Pete Carroll and he's like, I got a plan. I'm going to turn this ship around. Here's what I'm going to do. Remember when toward the end of my tenure in Seattle we sucked? Extrapolate that out over the next 4 years, and let's do that here, right? Imagine we suck that bad, but then worse. Look at the Steelers. Look at how bad Russell Wilson is. Let's bring that here to an even worse culture. You know? It's perfect. Let's go, boys. Oh, I'd be a little upset if I was, the owner of the Raiders and that was the plan. And then they hired the guy. Yes, Pete, yes. Let's do it. It's 2014, baby. Let's go. What's Richard Sherman doing these days, man? You know what I mean? All right, here's what I want to do. I said we were going to do a little bit of draft every single day. The main plan for today, if you didn't remember, is that we're going to start doing an audit, if you will, of the different players for the Green Bay Packers, just kind of going through, looking the year-end review, where guys ranked, stats, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to start with quarterback and work our way through, but to make sure we have as much time as we have, I want to do the draft first. And what I decided to do, I mentioned this before, is to kind of do my own The Beast draft guide. The big thing that we wait for pretty much all year. Decided not to wait for it. I'm just going to go ahead and gather the information. We'll do it a player at a time. We don't have to do this every single day, but on days when there's nothing else to do, we'll do this. And so I wanted to start with probably the earliest corner. I should put it this way. The highest ranked quarter on NFL NFL mock draft database. There we go. The highest ranked guy that we have a potential of getting. So Travis Hunter's number 1, Will Johnson is number 2. They rank 3rd and 6th on the board, so I'm guessing they're well out of our way pending some kind of a big fall. So that would leave Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame. He's currently sitting at 21st overall. His actual projection on NFL mock draft database is to the Packers at 23 as of right now. I did get a chance to watch him. I'll just give you my quick thoughts. Like always, I do my kind of once through first. I'll, potentially change my mind second time around. That's how it was with Edgerrin Cooper, by the way. I really didn't like him. Went back through a second time and really, really did like him. But I would put Benjamin Morrison in a bucket. All these guys, after a while, you kind of are like, okay, I've seen guys like this. I tend to put certain guys into like a Kevin King bucket. It's got nothing to do with size necessarily because he's not tall like Kevin King or Stokes necessarily. But the bucket is basically this. They can turn and run with anybody as long as that's in a straight line. His ability to get in somebody's hip and run straight down the field is incredible. As soon as a guy turns, though, I don't see him being a very sticky receiver. So, I mean, if your goal is to just play single high safety in the middle of the field and you got to make sure you got a guy that can turn and run and protect, and that's the only thing you really care about, I think that might be your guy. But he's got to do some work. I mean, this guy, quite a bit of separation I saw. But, similar to what I think most of us don't usually like, I think he does have the tools to where you could say, we could teach him, we can refine him. Does he actually have the ability? Does he have the agility? If he has the speed and agility and all that, then we could teach him technique and he can be a better player, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe, I don't know. Just in terms of what he's actually doing in Notre Dame, I don't know. It wouldn't be my hope. It's probably not a guy I'm going to be doing backflips for when the time comes, but we'll see. All right, here we go. Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame, 6 foot, 190 pounds, third-year junior out of Phoenix, Arizona, Brophy College Preparatory School, 20.87 years old. Benjamin Morrison was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona as part of an athletic family with deep roots in sports. His father, Daryl Morrison, played safety in the NFL from 93 to 96. He has 4 siblings who all became collegiate athletes: Faith, gymnastics at Washington; Samuel, football at Arizona and San Diego State; Grace, volleyball at App State; and Naomi, gymnastics at Michigan. Morrison attended Brophy College Preparatory, where he emerged as a versatile athlete, playing wide receiver, corner, and special teams. He made an immediate impact on varsity, showing natural playmaking ability and standout athleticism. As a senior, Morrison recorded 53 tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 passes defended, earning first-team all-region honors at both cornerback and kick returner. He averaged 28 yards per kick return during his junior year and was known for his ability to block kicks on special teams. 4-star recruit by 24/7 Sports, Rivals, and ESPN, Morrison was heavily recruited by major programs nationwide. He participated in the Polynesian Bowl before ultimately choosing Notre Dame over offers from Alabama, Oklahoma, LSU, and Michigan. 2022, he was freshman All-American with 97 interception return yards. 2023 Thorpe Awards semifinalist. 2024, he was team captain but had a season-ending hip injury. And he has a unofficial 4.39 40 time. So that's kind of going into it. The expectation is he's going to be a sub 4.4 guy. We'll see. Strengths: elite ball skills with 9 career interceptions, 18 pass breakups, smooth athlete with excellent short area quickness and fluid hips for mirroring receivers, high football IQ with advanced understanding of zone coverage, excels at reading quarterbacks, versatile enough to play both outside and slot cornerback, willing tackler and run support, arm length and wingspan meet NFL thresholds, allowing passer rating of 44.1 when targeted in coverage. Weaknesses: season-ending hip injury in 2024 after 6 games, struggles in press coverage against bigger receivers, can be overpowered by physical blockers and run support, missed tackle rate exceeding 16%, inconsistent transition and closing speed against faster receivers, limited second gear in deep coverage. So a lot of this is the exact opposite of what I had said. Style draws comparisons to Kendall Fuller and Kyle Fuller. He's a late first to early second round prospect. All right, there you go. There's number 1 in the bag. Be sure to check him out. Let me know what you think. All right, let's take our first break. We'll come back and get started with our year in review, starting with Mr. Jordan Love. We'll be right back. All right, this is officially year in review, Jordan Love. So, if we look at, let's start with just last year real quick. Jordan Love ended the season as the 12th highest graded quarterback with an 83.6 grade. He had an 83.2 passing grade. This year, Jordan overall ranked 20th with a 75.8 grade. As far as his passing grade, Jordan ranked 18th with a 74.3 passing grade. He ranked 35th in completion percentage, 17th in yards, 5th in yards per attempt, 11th in touchdowns, and 40th out of 43 in interceptions. His big-time throw rate was 28th, tied with Justin Fields at 3.4%, and his turnover-worthy play rate ranked 24th, tied with Mac Jones at 3.2%. Adjusted completion percentage, he ranked 25th. So again, even if you get rid of all the drops, his accuracy was, according to adjusted completion rate, 25th between Brock Purdy and Drake May. There were a lot of drops, there's no doubt about it, but he was not number one in drops. He ranked 5th total in drops. Joe Burrow, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, and Aaron Rodgers all saw their receivers drop more passes. As a percentage, he ranked 7th, with Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Andy Dalton, and Trevor Lawrence having a higher percentage of their passes dropped. According to PFF, there were 26 drops, 8.3% of his passes were dropped. He ranked 21st in time to throw, 2.76 seconds. And as far as his NFL passer rating, he ranked 20th. Flipping over to some next-gen stats, he was 25th in completion percentage over expected. So again, another accuracy metric. It was negative 1.2%. It was just 35 odds out of 35 quarterbacks. His EPA ranked 13th at 32.3. His EPA per dropback was 13th at 0.07 per dropback. His deep pass percentage was the second highest, behind only Anthony Richardson. Richardson is insanely high at 20%. Jordan is at 14.4, and then Josh Allen at 13.7. He was the second most blitzed quarterback in the NFL, which I think also probably has part to do with it. Mentioned early in the season he was really struggling against the blitz. Seemed like that got turned around, and then, I don't know, maybe that's part of the issue of what was going on. Only Gardner Minshew was blitzed more. Flipping over to the DVOA metrics, DYAR, which is kind of like DVOA, but it's like an actual yardage metric. They ranked him 6th highest with 995 being the metric. DVOA, he ranks 4th highest. So that's something that we're going to have to dig into a little bit. Again, he missed a lot of time. So there's, some little per game stuff. Not much though. So like everybody he's surrounded by, with the exception of Brock Purdy, played 16 to 17 games. He played 15. Most of the statistics, he is nowhere near top 5. DVOA has him as the 4th highest quarterback. You got Lamar, Goff, Allen, Love, Burrow, Baker, Brock, Herbert, Tua, and then Sam Darnold 10th. I think that's, again, it's going to be worth digging into. What exactly is DVOA looking at, where they saw him much more glowingly than a lot of others. I mean, I know you're looking at the competition, and the Packers did play some tough defenses, which is going to play a large part in this. You play Minnesota twice, and I know their defense was ranked really high, especially early in the season. Detroit had a really highly ranked defense early on. A lot of other guys, Philly, et cetera. There's also a play-to-play kind of deal. I don't know. It's interesting. Over at FTN Fantasy, they've also got an accuracy rate. Just, generally how often did you throw the ball accurately? He ranks 23rd at 73.6%. Success rate, how often did you throw a pass that had a successful outcome? He ranked 20th. Explosive play rate, he ranked 7th, 11.3%, actually tied with Jared Goff at 6th. They've got highlight throws, which are attempts that included a heightened level of difficulty to locate the ball. Well, that's for receiver, but you get the idea. It works for passing too. He had 13, which ties for 10th. As a percentage of his passes, though, at 3.1%, he's tied for 14th. Kind of interesting. They go through and chart out how often they face different coverages. So single high, 2 high, and then 0 safety help. So when you look at single high safety as a percentage, Jordan Love ranks 11th, 57.2%. Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at 2 high shell coverage, Jordan Love faced that less than anybody, 32nd out of 32 quarterbacks. And if you look at 0 coverage, the percentage of dropbacks where the defense had 0 deep safeties in coverage, he was the 6th highest. That's just weird to me, man. I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was one of the most blitzed quarterbacks in football. It sounds like this is what they just couldn't figure out, and this is what Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love have got to figure out, is how to make Jordan work with this. Because I'm guessing two deep safeties, see if they had these stats for last year. Yeah, he was middle of the pack last year. He ranked 16th in how often he saw two deep safeties. This year, dead last. Nobody played him with that. Played him a high percentage of middle field closed defense, a high percentage of 0 deep safeties. Also very weird, man coverage, second lowest rate ahead of only Tommy DeVito, 36.2%. Ninth highest zone coverage rate. Gonna have to digest some of this a little bit. First read throws, he's kind of middle of the pack. He ranked 14th, so how often you threw to your first read. Second read throws, similarly, he ranked 12th. Check down rate, he ranked 21st, so anytime you hear Bears fans tell you Jordan's a check down merchant, you can tell him he had the second highest deep throw rate and ranked 21st in check downs, just so you know. If you want to make somebody in the NFC North, it's actually Jared Goff. He was the 5th highest check down rate. We've got another metric called catchable air yards. What percentage of the yards through the air were from a catchable ball? I guess you could say he ranked 17th, 57%. And then they had prayer yard percentage, which is percentage of a quarterback's air yards that were not catchable. He ranked 17th, 43%. 17th lowest, I guess you would say. And then in terms of dropped air yards, you would assume this would be very high because Jordan threw the ball down the field a lot and the Packers guys dropped a lot of passes. 23rd, actually, just 86 dropped air yards, meaning there are 22 more yards dropped by other, for other quarterbacks than for Jordan. Baker Mayfield had it the worst, 270 dropped air yards. Pat Mahomes, 260. Stafford, 221, et cetera, et cetera. Again, they got Jordan at 86. Got a metric called ALEX, which is air less expected. It's average depth of target compared to where the sticks are on a given play. So if you need 7 yards, how far did you throw? If you threw it 7, your ALEX would be 0. If you threw it 8, it would be 1. If you threw it 6, it would be, -1. Get it? Jordan Love was the 4th highest. Will Levis, Joe Flacco, CJ Stroud, and then Jordan Love. He was at -0.1, meaning he just about throws to the sticks on average every play. Deep passing, completion percentage on passes 20-plus yards down the field. He ranks 19th with 36.4%. And then if we look at pressure, sack rate, he had the 5th lowest sack rate in the NFL, actually the 4th lowest. He was tied with Jared Goff. Joe Flacco, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, and then Jared Goff and Jordan Love ranked 4th lowest. He also had the 5th lowest pressure rate in the NFL. Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Flacco, Tua, and then Jordan. So again, one of the best pass-blocking offensive lines in the entire NFL. I mean, even if you look at Jared Goff, who tied him in sack rate, he's 16th in pressure rate. So Jordan had one of the most comfortable pockets to play behind in the entire NFL. Clean pocket percentage, he ranks 5th. Flacco, Murray, Tua, Trevor, and then Jordan. 77.4% of his passes were in a clean pocket. Had the 7th lowest QB hit rate. Tua, Jalen, Joe Flacco, Kyler Murray, Lamar, Josh, and then Jordan Love, 11.7% hit rate. So some pretty interesting things in there. Again, DVOA had him really high. That'll be interesting to kind of think through a little bit. The fact that he saw such little too high coverage. And again, these aren't official numbers by any means. These are going to vary. I mean, even between some of the stats that you'll find here, I kind of just allowed one site, if this site says that's what it is, I'm not going to read it in every other one and contradict it, but they're all going to have slightly different things. But suffice it to say, if it wasn't the lowest, too high shell rate in the NFL, it was certainly one of the lowest, and it's worth looking at. He's one of the highest in, zero coverage, in zero, deep safety coverage, which again is very common when you're blitzed a lot. To me, those are the two most interesting things, and maybe worth, again, What does that mean? Why couldn't they overcome that? What do they need? Is it, drawing up different plays for Jordan? Is it getting him more accustomed to those types of things? Because, again, I'm guessing people are doing it because it's working, and that's the problem. If there's a button you can push to make Jordan not good at football, you're going to push that button over and over and over and over and over again. And that's why it was such a high rate, because everybody just kept pushing the button. Why stop? Especially if Jordan ends up being a very good quarterback. If you give him too high coverage, he can pick you apart. You're just never going to give him that. Why would you give it to him? So if there's something they have to do as far as getting a certain type of receiver or whatever that may be, they got to invest in that quickly. Maybe that's a guy, like I said, not necessarily Devontae, but a Devontae type guy that can win off the line quick. If you're just gonna press up my guy and have no help behind and it's just mano-a-mano, get a guy like Devontae that can just beat a guy off the line in a quick slant, take the ball, boom, out of your hands, force him to kind of back off a little bit. I don't know. I'm just, again, this is all new. I'm just working through processing a little bit here, but that's what it seems like to me. Is they understood, teams understood that, and again, very low man coverage rate. So I don't know, man. Very, very weird stuff. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back and do the receivers, I guess. We'll do the receivers. We'll be right back. Well, it's official. San Francisco 49ers and head coach Kyle Shanahan officially named former Jets head coach as their new defensive coordinator. Saleh now returns to the job he held before the Jets hired him as their head coach. Well, that sucks. Other news, Brian Schottenheimer, listen to me. Brian Schottenheimer is the Dallas head coach and is expected to bring in Bears former head coach Brian Eberflus what is my problem? Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator, so that'll be an interesting situation over there. Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator, so they're just promoting him to head coach. I think Eberflus would be a good defensive coordinator, so we'll see. The wheels keep turning. All right, so not to necessarily rub salt in the wound or anything like that, but as we move on to wide receiver, I just want to remind everybody that there was a contingent of people that genuinely believed that we had multiple number one wide receivers. Multiple. Now, very easy metric that you could potentially use, whatever you want. My eye test or whatever nonsense is not going to cut it for me. But roughly speaking, if you're a number one wide receiver, I should expect to see you in the top 32 via whatever metric you want to use. PFF is a pretty easy metric to use. And again, I think PFF is a good metric because if you just read off the names, it's going to be a list of the top receivers. I don't see any Packers in the top 32. So we didn't see them last year. And we went through this whole thing. It was a big deal. We have, 2 or 3 or 4 number one wide receivers. And I said, I went through every metric that I could find. And by no metric did we have, I don't even think one. I think maybe by 1 or 2 different standards, there might have been one in each different category. Watson was a number one based on just this one category, and Reed based on this one category or something. But there was no way in the world you could come to the conclusion definitively that we had multiple number one wide receivers. And we're in that situation again this year. And I don't think anybody necessarily disagrees anymore. But I think we should officially put that one to bed. Do I think Watson, if given a full year, could potentially be that guy? Sure. I think he could, any one of them could maybe. I could see Reed possibly, in a given year could end up in the top 32. There's a lot of fluctuation and whatnot. But the bottom line is, right now, if you look at it, the highest graded receiver is Jayden Reed, and he ranked 48th. Romeo Doubs, 55th. Christian Watson, 58th. Dontavian Wicks, 71st. Now, a number 2 would be in the top 64. That would mean we have 3 number 2s, and Wicks is like a number 3, right? And not even necessarily very high number 2, right? Not 33rd, not 36th, not 37th, not 39th, not 40th. 48th was our highest graded receiver. If we go based on receiving grade, it gets even a little bit worse. They're very tightly put together. Jayden Reed 50th, Watson 53rd, Romeo 54th. So they're right there, with 0 of them being inside of the top 50. Wicks falls all the way down to 83rd with a 63.8 PFF grade. Jayden Reed 71.6, Watson 71.3, Romeo 71. If we're looking at yardage, Jayden Reed is 33rd. Christian Watson is 50th. Romeo Doubs is 52nd. Yards per reception, Christian Watson is actually the 3rd highest at 21.6. Only Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Alec Pierce were higher. Jayden Reed is 15th. Romeo Doubs 49th. So, attacking deep down the field obviously was not a problem for this crew. Touchdowns, Jayden Reed 28th with 6. Dontavian Wicks was 40th with 5. Romeo 48th with 4, etc., etc. If you like yards per route run, which I do, Christian Watson 14th, Jayden Reed 19th, Romeo Doubs 54th. Now, if you're going based on that metric, you've got your top 2 guys by a mile, and Romeo Doubs is really nowhere near that. And I do think it's a good metric because it's, yardage, but obviously we're taking into account how often you actually ran routes. So every time you ran a route, how productive were you? It doesn't include touchdowns, and obviously it doesn't really take into account drops other than it's a route where you didn't get any yardage, which is most routes. So it wouldn't distinguish between, a pass to Jayden Reed and a pass to you that you dropped. But as far as just being productive when you're on the field, Christian Watson and Jayden Reed were both relatively high. But especially Christian Watson, just not a lot of time on the field. You look at routes run just by guys around him. Christian Watson, 274 routes run. CeeDee Lamb, 526. Drake London, 548. Amon-Ra, 597. Just not on the field enough, So, if you extrapolate his yards per route run, the point is, if you take him and then multiply it by how many routes CeeDee Lamb ran, in the same amount of games, by the way, this is the thing. They both played 15 games. So it's not just because he was injured. He's just not on the field very much. So based on yards per route run, if he was out there running as many routes as Drake London ran, you're looking at 1,200 yards. Jayden Reed did run quite a bit more, which is why he ended up with almost 1,000 yards at 903, but he ran 411. So, we have a lot of receivers, and I think that there was a pretty heavy rotation. You got Romeo, who also had 379 routes run. Jayden with 411. Christian, 274. They got to put that guy on the field more. I don't understand. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. Maybe it was load management for him. I really don't. If that's the case, then the value of Christian Watson just goes down. If we can't play him because we're worried he's going to get hurt, then we can't play him. You're only as valuable as what you can produce on the field. If you're not on the field, you can't produce. So I don't know the reasoning behind that. Obviously, he was out for a couple games. Week 4, he was only out there for 5 snaps. Presumably, that was some kind of an injury also. So maybe there were other injuries early in the season. Week 2, only 11 routes run. Week 3, only 15. So yeah, I don't know. And then against Chicago, week 18, only 8 routes run. So he was out week 17, played week 18, but almost not at all. Went down injured in that game. I don't know. Whatever. He played in 15 games, and in 5 of those games, he had 0 yards receiving. Week 2 against Indy, Week 4 against Minnesota, Week 12 against San Francisco, Week 16 against New Orleans, and Week 18 against Chicago. He only had 9 yards Week 7 against Houston, 13 yards against Philly. So 5 games with 0. That would be 10 games where he produced a single yard, 9 games where he produced over 10 yards, 8 games where he produced over 20 yards. He had 6 games with 50 or more yards, only 1 game with 50 or more yards and a touchdown. That was Arizona with 68 yards and a touchdown. He had 2 games over 100 yards. Week 14 against Detroit, 114. Week 11 against Chicago, 150 yards. In all those games where he had less than 10 yards, he had less than 20 snaps receiving. Almost every game above that, he had 20 or more. Week 3, he only had 15. Week 11, he had 15. But otherwise, it was 20 or more snaps, and he produced, right? So lack of opportunities. It's kind of like some running backs where if you give him about 10, he might get, like A.J. Dillon. I always felt like if you give him 10 snaps, he'll produce nothing. If you give him 20, he'll have a big game because eventually he's going to get going. He's going to build up. He's going to have a couple of big runs in there. But if you don't have any opportunities, it's going to be a whole lot of 2-yard gains and a whole lot of nothing. Didn't do all this with Jordan, but it's worth going through. His grades week by week. 50-50, rounding here, 50-50, 70-50. So it was a really rough start for him. And 70-50, 60-60, 90-40, 70-50, 70-50, and then, his injured game against Chicago, he ended with a 39 grade. So I don't know how much we can put stock in that last grade there, but one game at a 93, 1, 2, 3, 4-ish games at a 70. One of them is a 69.6. 2 games in the 60s, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the 50s, and then a 47 against San Francisco and a 39 against Chicago, if we even want to count that again. But just not what you're hoping for. He was healthy most of the season. Didn't play as much as I wish he would have. Didn't produce as much as you would hope overall. The grades, again, are not fantastic. Now, PFF, I don't know. I don't know exactly how they would grade certain things. I mean, some things you're just kind of going through the motions, especially Watson. You're drawing away guys. I mean, if you're carrying a safety and then you're carrying a corner and you're drawing a safety to come with you, are they going to ding you because you're just pulling 2 players away or something? Well, he didn't get open. Well, yeah, no kidding, dummy. I don't know. I don't know how they grade all that. All right, let's look at Jayden Reed real quick. We'll start with his week to weeks. Really up and down. So 89, 60, 60, 70, 70, 60, 40, 50, 70, 70, 60, 70, 40, 70, 70, 40, 50, 70. So he was much higher highs and much lower lows. Really never did anything more than twice. So he had his elite game week 1, 2 subpar games, 2 good games, mediocre game, 2 bad games, 2 good games, mediocre game, good game, bad game, 2 good games, 2 bad games, and a good game. Okay. Overall, he had 190, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games in the 70s. So about half his season was quite good. I mean, that accounts for, 8 games? 71.6 being the lowest in there, where, a lot of Christians where he had the one really good game and then a lot of low 70s. This is 71 through 77. Then you got 1, 2, 3, 4 games in the 60s, 2 games in the 50s, 3 games in the 40s, and that's where the big problem comes in. 46 against Minnesota week 17, 44.5 against Detroit week 14, 40.1 week 7 against Houston. Jayden only had 1 game with 0 yards, which is a big contrast to Christian with 5. He had 2 games under 10 with 1 game at 10 yards. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games with 50 or more yards, 3 games with 100 or more yards. He had 1 game over 50, or 2 games over 50 yards with 2 touchdowns. Both of them were actually over 100. So his big games, week 1, Philly, 138 and a touchdown. Week 4, Minnesota, 139 and a touchdown. So, Jayden got on a lot of people's bad side, I think, because of the bad games. But, I mean, he's a pretty productive dude. Didn't have a single game without a target. His lowest was week 14. He had 1 target, 0 receptions. But he had a target in every single game. He had 3 targets or more in every game except 4. He had 4 targets or more in every game except 5, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games with 6 or more targets. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games with 4 or more receptions, 4 games with 5 or more receptions, and then week 6 against Arizona, 6 receptions. Week 4 against Minnesota, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 139 yards, and a touchdown. So he's more remembered for his bad weeks, that's for sure. But you know, I think we need a little more consistency from Jayden. But I mean I like it. I mean if you just round off some of these 40s a little bit, he's, you know, again, you never went more than like 2 weeks without having usually back-to-back pretty good games. So again, hopefully we can raise up the lows, find ways to make sure he doesn't get completely blanked. And again, I do think there were some opportunities there in some of those games that I saw where he did get open. And I think, you know, you get the ball to him, he catches it, he runs for an additional 10 yards. Some of these 40s turn into 50s, 60s. But I think we need more clarity at wide receiver, man. The Romeo Doubs and Tavian Wicks thing, even, you know, some of the other receivers that we had mixed in, we got to start, and this is one of the things that with the Packers that can be somewhat annoying. And I know Romeo played a big part at times, and I mean we pushed the Wicks thing really hard. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'm surprised how much he was still playing all the way down the stretch. But the lack of clarity and the lack of ability to just say these are our superstars, we're not taking them off the field, like with our pass rushers. I know maybe they don't see Rashawn as a premier pass rusher, and that's fine. He didn't play like one this past year, but I mean, even when he was, it was like a 60-40 split between the ones and the twos, and I don't care for that very much. But anyways, all right, Romeo Doubs, let's do a little bit more consistent but similar to Jayden. I think not quite as low a lows, but we'll run through his real quick. 60-70, 50-50, 60-70-70, 40-50, 70-70, 60-70-60. So he had, a couple high 69s. We'll call those 70s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the 70s. No 80s or 90s. He had 1, 2, 3, 4 in the 60s. 1, 2, 3 in the 50s, and then 1 in the 40s. He did miss time. He played weeks 1 through 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17 in the wild card. So obviously some of that was him refusing to play and suspension and all that. But, you know, missing time nonetheless. We've got, let's see, no games with 0 targets, 0 games with 0 yards. So he was in every single game, the most consistent receiver, I suppose. Actually never had less than 2 targets in a game. He had 3 games with 2 targets and 1 reception. His lowest amount of yards was 13, so not only did he have no games with 0, he didn't have any single digits either. 2 targets, 2 receptions, 13 yards was his lowest and least productive as far as yards is concerned. He had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games over 50, no games over 100. I think the problem would be the touchdowns. He did have 4 touchdowns, but he had 2 games with 2 touchdowns, meaning he only had touchdowns in 2 games. Arizona, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 49 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 15 against Seattle, 5 targets, 3 receptions, 40 yards, 2 touchdowns. Forgot to look at this for the other 2 receivers, but he did actually go backwards. So in his rookie year, he had a 62.6 grade, 62 receiving. That jumped up to a 74 overall, 74 receiving. That went down to a 69.7 overall and a 71 receiving. Not a huge drop-off, but he did go backwards. Then we get Dontavian Wicks. Wicks took a huge jump backwards. As a rookie, he had a 78 overall, 77 receiving grade, 605 yards, 5 touchdowns, with the exact same amount of receptions, 41 receptions. This year, 41 receptions, 454, 5 touchdowns, 65 overall, 64 receiving. He had, if we just go through his weeks, 40, 70, 40, 60, 50, 60, 60, 70, 40, 50, 60, 60, 70, 70, 60, 60, 70, 60. So a whole lot of just like 60s and 50s with a couple, there were 2 solid 70s mixed in there with a couple very low 70s. Overall, One, two, three, four, 5 games in the 70s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the 60s. 2 in the 50s and 3 in the 40s. Week 9 against Detroit, Week 1 against Philly, Week 3 against Tennessee. He had 4 games with 0 targets, 0 receptions, 0 yards. He also had just 9 yards Week 6 against Arizona, 11 against Jacksonville, 13 against New Orleans, 14 against Seattle. So under 20 yards was about half his season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games under 20 yards, 5 under 10 yards, 4 of them with 0. He had just 1 game over 50 yards. Week 4 against Minnesota, he had 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. That accounted for a large percentage of his production this year. As far as touchdowns, he had 3 others. 1 against Houston, 1 against Indy, and 1 against New Orleans, 5 total touchdowns. And then the big ones, drops. Jayden Reed was the second highest in drops, tied for third. Actually tied with Devontae, interestingly enough. But Cortland Sutton, CeeDee Lamb led the league in drops. Jayden Reed with 11, Jayden Reed 10, along with Devontae Adams, Jerry Jeudy, and Jamar Chase. So pretty good receivers. After that was 9 drops. Dontavian Wicks was in that pile of guys with, actually it's just George Pickens had 9. Romeo Doubs tied for 24th with 5 drops. And then Christian Watson tied for 68th with just 2 drops, according to PFF. Contested catch rate was actually quite good. Jayden Reed was 7th in the NFL, and then Watson, Romeo both tied for 10th as far as contested catch rate goes. Jayden Reed was 9 of 13, 69.2%. Christian Watson was 10 of 15, Romeo 12 of 18. And I thought they all did a very good job with that. Again, there's a huge narrative about, Jordan needs help. I mean, aside from, 2 guys really with drop issues, which, isn't good, their ability to go up and get footballs in these 50-50s are actually quite good. Again, in fact, we've got 3 top 10 receivers when it comes down to it. So, very, very, very good job this year of going and digging some of those out. Moving on over to some of the next-gen stats stuff, we'll start with some of the metrics that they have, such as catch rate over expected. Our highest, probably won't surprise some of you, was actually Malik Heath, positive 9.7. That ranks 30th. Then you've got Christian Watson ranking 62nd. This page, there's 244 receivers. The page goes up to 70. I'm not going to go to the next page. If you're not in the top 70, I'm just not going to talk about you. Receiving EPA, Jayden Reed ranks 20th. That's a pretty good metric if you wanted to use that. Romeo Doubs, 35th. Christian Watson, 58th. And then moving over to FTN, if you're looking at, where is it? DVOA, DYAR. If you're looking at DYAR, on the front page is the top 32. We had 0 in there. On the second page, which would be your number 2 receivers, they actually had Dontavian Wicks at 35, Jayden Reed at 39, Tucker Kraft, which apparently they have tight ends in here. I just wanted wide receivers. But Tucker Kraft, 58, Romeo, 62, and I'm not going to page 3. All right, I filtered everybody out, so there's just receivers now. But DVOA, they actually have Dontavian Wicks at 11th. Again, all right. I have to mull that one over. Jayden Reed at 30th. Christian Watson, 33rd. Romeo Doubs, 45th. And once again, mentioned the whole man coverage, zone coverage thing when it comes to Jordan Love. I looked at man coverage for our receivers. Nobody was in the top 32. When you switch over to the guys that played zone the most, Dontavian Wicks, 3rd highest zone rate. And that might be part of the problem with Wicks as well. I always thought of Wicks as a guy that can play really well against man coverage. 66.5% of the time in zone. Same with Watson. Watson's the guy you want playing, when they're trying to play you in man coverage. 65.1%. Wicks saw zone coverage the 3rd most of any receiver. Drake London, T. Higgins, then Dontavian Wicks, then Michael Wilson, Rondale Moore, then Christian Watson. That's a lot. Romeo Doubs saw it the 16th highest, Jayden Reed the 27th highest. So all 4 of them out of 80 receivers that they have listed here, were in the top almost 25 in how much they saw zone, which should speak a little higher to Jayden and might be why he kind of broke out, with the exception of a couple games where I think they were playing a little bit more man. But it's a very weird thing. And the last one we'll look at here is opportunity share, the percentage of the team's total opportunity that the player had. There was nobody in the top 32. Again, kind of speaks to how much they spread the ball around. But Jayden Reed was 33rd, 10%. Romeo Doubs, 41st, 9.1%. We'd have to go to the next page here. Dontavian Wicks ranks 71st, 5.6%. Christian Watson, 75th, 5.4%. That's out of 80. So Christian Watson really not getting a lot of opportunities at all, actually below Dontavian Wicks. So, all right, we're going to leave it at that. We'll continue this tomorrow. Probably look at running back, tight end, offensive line if there's time. We'll see, but we'll work on this. It'll take some time. Some stuff to ponder for sure. Quite a few things to go back and contemplate. I'm sure Matt LaFleur is doing the same, to kind of go back and say, why the heck did they play us like that, and what are we going to do moving forward? I don't know, but got to figure that one out. You guys have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.